Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Merav Yuravlivker, the Chief Learning Officer at Data Society, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Vidya Krishnan, who's the Chief Learning Officer at Ericsson. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think fewer and fewer people need to understand why AI is important. I think most
Exactly.
people are there. So they
Yes.
understand that they need some of that proficiency. Can you talk to me about maybe an obstacle that you encountered when you were trying to implement this? I mean,
So many. I mean,
a lot of people want to understand also where the challenges are.
yeah. I mean, again, I think it was a bit unconventional that we did it this way because really, when you think about learning and skills, you think about more than one. You don't just think about one. And so there was
Hmm.
this worry like, are we being too small? Are
Hmm.
we trying to do too little? And definitely we faced the obstacles of buy-in. While there was no struggle to get people to think that AI was the one to focus on and was valuable, not everyone felt that this was attainable. I'm too busy. People are busy. We don't have time for this. And so I think they did appreciate, and that helped us realize we can't make it about consumption. It has to be based on qualification. Another obstacle that, I think quickly got addressed, but how do you make this kind of thing attainable, accessible, available at scale? And thankfully, at that moment, we had started to implement Degreed in our ecosystem. That
Hmm.
turned out to be a vital tool in our ecosystem for enabling that kind of easy access to both the content, the pathways, but also the assessments and the people who could help with being ready for those things. So we faced those obstacles as well. And then a lot of people were still skeptical. How do you measure efficacy? And they were used to seeing a lot of metrics on learning. But again, we counterintuitively said we think the only one that matters is how many people are at what level of skill and where are they? And we really simplified that. And at that time, we were very new in the space of people analytics.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so there were no dashboards of really pragmatic use to know your skill supply. I'm fond of saying that I think skills are like oxygen, they're vital, but they're invisible. And analytics is what makes them visible. And so that was a new capability for us that we didn't have. And that was an obstacle. We had to become good at it. We had to create, we had to reinvent our roles in a sense, as we continue to do, to make these analytics not only visible, but valuable. And that was
I,
about data visualization and not just data analytics. So all of these were challenges, and we still have some of them. And there's still groups of people, and as much as we're so proud of the progress we've made, we're equally critical that when we look at our analytics, we have left people behind. There
mm,
are underrepresented groups that are not showing up in the critical skills. And those continue to be challenges. How do we get that group of people? Why aren't those people participating as much? Why are these people so underrepresented? It's usually along the dimensions of gender, um, geography, and generation. So
mhm.
these are some of the many obstacles that we continue to encounter, but each one of them really taught us a lesson about the need to simplify the entire process and to some extent treat skills as a product. And by that, I mean, within our team to kind of own AI as a skill product, which means we own the roadmap. We have executive sponsors who take responsibility and accountability for how many people at Ericsson have AI skills. That inventory and the size of it, the adequacy of it is their responsibility. And so it became a business co ownership. And I think that's maybe the most important challenge and the most important lesson. Skills cannot be a thing that L&D exclusively owns
Mhm.
or HR. They are absolutely, something that is co-owned by the company. And if you don't systematically make that the case, it's not enough to just say it. If you don't systematically, operationally make that the case, then you will not get the level of systematic penetration that you need to achieve valuable outcomes at scale. So I think those have been the challenges and lessons.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that because it's such a mind shift. It's a cultural mind shift,
Yeah.
right? In terms of how to think about these skills and how to think about the importance and the longitudinal effect that it has, right? It's like going to the gym, right? You're not going to see those gains on day 1 or even on day 30, right? It takes consistent going to start to see those results. And it's the same thing with learning. It has to have that level of consistency and shaking it up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned some people might be feeling left behind. Then it's a question of digging into why. Maybe they need a different modality, right? Maybe some people need that instructor or that advisor to support them. Maybe they need to be group learning. What types of accountability are there? Are they seeing all of the successes within your organization? Things like that. Now it's the time where you take those analytics and go even that level deeper because you've built that infrastructure in place. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear how you're going to continue that.
And I think it's an existential reimagining of why we do what we do and how we do what we do. Because, as I
Hmm.
said, our job is to create conditions in which people can change themselves. We can't change them.
Yeah.
And changing yourself comes from wanting something different that makes you believe something different, that makes you learn something different, that makes you do something different. And so, creating the conditions of consequence where people could
Hmm.
clearly see the people who are making time for this are having outcomes that I would want for myself. And the
Yeah.
people who aren't are not. I think is one of the most powerful things we can do, which is the different set of responsibility. Creating conditions is a harder, different set of responsibility than curating content, putting assessments in front of people, urging them
Exactly.
to complete it, figuring out which modality you want. I mean, those things sometimes are part of the job, but that's not the job. The
Hmm.
job is to create conditions in which people can and will change their own skill sets, mindsets, tool sets. And here, I think one of our advantages as Ericsson has been we're a technology company. We have been changing as technology changes all the years we've been in existence. We started out as a telegraph repair operation, in the late 1800s, started by a man and a woman, and that's not what we are now. So technology is inherently upgradable. When you look at your phone, you don't want to stay on 2G or 3G forever. You want 4G, 5G. You hope and anticipate one day 6G and everything beyond. If that's inherently upgradable, well, so are we. And I think that helped us culturally drive across a message that right now at Ericsson, there's zero tolerance for zero learning.
Mm. I like that zero tolerance for zero learning. I imagine you don't get a lot of calls for telegraph repairing
No.
anymore. Um, but along those lines, let's dig into that a little bit because, a lot of people are concerned about AI replacing their jobs, right? And so there might be some of that hesitancy there. And I'm curious in your role, how you see AI and people working together for the future of learning. What are you observing there?
So much. I think the first thing is, when we look ahead, we have to remember to look back as well and realize that it's not a new thing, that the passage of time and technology and human tenacity creates shifts that replace jobs, that tomorrow's jobs in many areas are constantly replacing yesterday's jobs. And so the question is much broader than will AI replace human jobs and humans? It's really, will the work of tomorrow replace the work of today and yesterday? And the answer is resoundingly yes. And like always, that can either happen to you or through you. And the opportunity, as scary as it is to enable a company and a workforce to make that happen through them rather than to them. That's the first thought that I have. The second one is that progress is something more valuable and something above and beyond productivity. And so while I absolutely understand the value, the shareholder value, the corporate value, the employee value of chasing productivity and the appeal that AI has in enabling huge unprecedented gains in productivity, we can also see that at some point, the rapid penetration and proliferation of these tools is going to make that productivity a commodity. Competitive advantage won't come from productivity alone. It never does. It comes from progress. It comes from vision. It comes from creativity. It comes from competitive advantage. Imagining something that no one else is able to quite see, that is turns out to be the solution to a problem we've always had. All the technology, including generative AI, has demonstrated that. And so I think that's the other caution for
Mhm.
us to recognize that there's something even more valuable than short term productivity that we need to be chasing and preparing our people to usher in. And that can only be done by a generative combination of human and artificial intelligence. I think that's essential as well. And then I think the third thing is that the first two things can only happen when a company can weaponize constructive creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Constructive, not destructive. And so if you permit culturally fear, either the fear of ignorance or the fear of the lack of guardrails or the
Mm-hmm.
lack of ethics, if you permit fear to permeate the workforce in the name of productivity, you are actually creating conditions in which that creativity can't happen at scale.
Mm-hmm.
And the companies that I believe will win will be those that figure out how to monetize multi-generational creativity
Mm-hmm.
and will create a culture not of fear, but the judgment that something is more important than that fear, and that is value creation in an unprecedented way. And again, you just need to look back at human history to know that jobs have always changed, but callings have not. The calling
Mm-hmm.
to help people, the calling to heal people, the calling to enable people, the calling to manage people, these things have remained, even though the titles, the style of work, the responsibilities, the tasks, and even the skills have changed. Those callings, the essence of why you do the work, has always remained, even as the way you do it got reimagined. So sometimes I think we get very wrapped up in this is going to change, this job is going away, that job is going away. And obviously, it's people's livelihoods at stake, and that's why. And that's why I think companies have a very special role to play in reestablishing trust, even in this crazy climate, that a company is the classroom of the future. And this is our job, it's our sacred duty to create creativity in our people that they can then use to harness these powerful tools for good, along with human creativity, to reimagine work and reimagine their job roles and make sure that the new jobs are happening through them and not just to them.
Mm-hmm. I think you hit on a lot of really important points. And, something that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to call out is, the ability to let your people fail assessments without fear of, any
Yeah.
retribution or demotions or anything like that. To That's how creativity and that's how progress happens, is the ability to fail, because it gives people the opportunity to try new things. And
Yeah.
I'm hearing that in a lot of how you've led um, these programs and these initiatives. It's giving people the opportunity and the space to try these different things freely.
Yes.
And I think that's so critical, especially as things keep evolving so quickly.
It's
I
remarkable to see
know,
what people
yeah,
do, when you do that. And I always
yeah.
say this is nothing more or less than offering what we wish we had ourselves. Imagine what school would be like if instead of being given an exam once, you were given it 2 or 3 times,
Mhm.
and the only
Mhm.
score that mattered was the one on the 3rd try. You would stop
Yeah.
obsessing that you got a bad grade on the first one. You would use it to figure out how you're going to do better on the second one. And some people would get it on 2 and other people would get it on 3. But the real shift from the first one to the third one would be this non-judgmental journey of pure improvement. And isn't
Mhm.
that what we want more than,
That's
this is
learning,
the
right?
curve, this is the GPA, this is your rank, this is like none of that, is anything that a person looks forward to that really unlocks their boldest learning. So I think that's nothing more or less than what I would want every time I ever learned something. I never had, the best grade or I got the top grade on the test, and I would make stupid mistakes and I would also make smart mistakes. And the
Mhm.
inability to learn from them would always stunt my growth. So
Yeah.
I really do agree that companies are increasingly going to, whether they realize it or not, compete on how effectively they can remove fear and
Mhm.
generate, as powerfully as an
Mhm.
algorithm, psychological safety, constructive, creative psychological safety at scale in their workforce.
I'm This is a topic I could talk about all day, but I know we are um nearing the end. So I'll leave with one last question, um, which is for you to now give some advice to the people who are listening and who are watching. What's one piece of advice that you would give to other executives and learning leaders who want to implement this type of program?
I think it would be to recognize that you need to be systematic rather than programmatic.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
appeal of a program is always strong, right? The huge initiative, this huge buy-in, we're going to launch this and everyone's going to see us launch this and it's going to be extremely visible and it's going to shake things up and it's going to have lots of immediate payoff. And that's very attractive and appealing and it has its value, but it will never be enough. And so I would say, skills never go out of style. The capabilities of the workforce are the number one determinant of whether the strategy will be executed. And knowing that, you have to be systematic in whatever it is you choose to do. And by definition, systematic means it's going to happen again and again and again. And you have thought about all the interconnections that should make it happen better and better and better, including the
Mm-hmm.
need to refresh itself, the need to sunset things and recognize what's eroding, recognize what's emerging. Just the same way you do with strategy every year, you don't let it sit there. You refine it and define it. Its essence remains the same, but you usually tweak it as you go. That same system, that same discipline, rigor, schedule, prioritization needs to apply to skills and putting them to work.
Love that. And I think we'll have to leave it there. I think I really appreciate this conversation, and it's clear that the way that you've approached it has been so thoughtful and so effective and obviously impactful for Ericsson and for all of the people who have gone through these programs. I'm sure that they've seen that shift. Thank you so much for joining me today, Vidya. For
Thank you.
more interviews and insights, please visit cdomagazine.tech. Thank you again, and appreciate your time.